It just said this conference is being recorded. So there we are.
Yeah, it came through just then.
All right, good. I think it wanted to let everybody know. But again, thank you for joining. This is Omega Tips and Tricks, Part 2. My name is Dana Goodale. I'm with Gerber Technology up here in Connecticut. And again, one of the great assets of a webinar is that we can have great interactivity. You can ask questions along the way. I can make some pit stops or detours or whatever. So if you have any questions, please take advantage of that interactivity. So one of the first things I always like to talk about, and if anybody has joined any of the previous webinars, I always like to talk about where to find additional information. So I just sort of give a quick overview. So of course we have our website. It's www.gspinc.com. And probably one of the best places, let me just bring this up here, that you can go to if you are on the gspinc.com website. You can go to the Learning Center, and then we have all sorts of information about our various products. If you want to learn about Omega Software, which is what this webinar is about, just click on Omega Software, and then we have all kinds of PDF files and presentations and templates, and you can see what's new what features have been added release by release all the way back to Omega 2.5. And then even down at the bottom, we have all kinds of different videos. And you notice the previous video, Omega 6.0 Tips and Tricks webinar on 8/30/16. So you can even watch the recap, and I'll send the link of these webinars in my follow-up email. But all kinds of information here, more than you can shake a stick at. You can spend many happy hours reviewing videos and things like that, and listening to the dulcet tones of Dana Goodale. So that's number one. Number two, of course, is on the DVD that comes, that houses the Omega software itself. We have all help files, PDF manuals, documents, videos, etc. Kind of similar to what you just saw in the Learning Center, but it's right there on your own computer. Also, in that Learning Center, we have two tools that are a little outdated, but they still can be fantastic tools to get an overview of how to use Omega. We have a learning guide, and that's available in that Learning Center, as well as a video learning guide. The learning guide is just a PDF file of lessons going through and talking about all the different aspects of Omega, from text entry to assigning colors to raster to vector to whatever. And then there's also a video learning guide, which are actually narrated videos of each of those lessons as well. So you can download those there as well. And then the other thing finally that I'd like to show is our online help system. And when I say online, it means it's just information at your fingertips right in Omega. So the way that I like to use the help system is you can always press F1 and then kind of search for a term. But the way that I like to use it is more specific than that. I hold down the Shift key and then press F1. And you notice that my cursor changed to a pointer with a question mark. That means that I can go and click on a menu, and I can get information about a particular menu item just by holding down Shift and F1 and then clicking on a menu item. So I just clicked on Outline, and it's telling me all about Outline. So I don't have to try to figure out what the terminology is, because sometimes the software has a certain term, and if you don't know what that term is, then how do you learn about it? So you can go ahead into a menu and satisfy your yearning for information just by doing Shift F1.
Hey, Dan, I have a question.
Yeah, great. What you got?
I'm trying to get on right now, and a passcode. What's a passcode?
There shouldn't be a passcode for this particular webinar. You should just be able to...
asking for one.
If there is one, did anyone else need a passcode? Hopefully not. But it would be Omega, but I didn't put a requirement for a passcode in there. Let's see if I can...
Even if I try to type something in, it doesn't accept anything. I'm trying to log in.
Well, the good news is, if you can't get in, that I will, if you signed up for the webinar, and
yes.
What's your name?
Wild Bill.
Oh, good. Good to see you again. Thanks for joining. I don't see you in here, but I'll make sure that I send you the recording if you're not able to get on, okay?
Okay. All right. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. I apologize. Maybe if once you hang up, you can try again, and you'll be successful.
Okay.
Okay.
You.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you.
Anyway, so that's just where you can find more information after the webinar. So I have a lot of text and a lot of screen grabs here in PowerPoint, but what I like to do is just jump right into Omega and kind of show the features live right on the screen. So as I was saying before, we kind of covered the topics over here on the left side all the way down through images in part 1 of Tips and Tricks. So I'm going to pick up right here with strokes for chokes and then try to make my way down through the topics here for part 2, if that's okay.
It came in. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, good. That's you, Bill?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I'm glad.
Thank you.
All right. So with that being said, and one of the things I don't really have this as a topic, but what I'm using over here on the left-hand side is the Composer layer tree. And the layer tree is a way for you to kind of organize your jobs if you want to. You have the ability to use groups and combines, and of course you can save items into various files. But the layer tree is a nice way to allow you to kind of segment your job or segment your information into different layers where you have related topics on each layer. So that's kind of what I'm using over here just as sort of an overview. And as you see, we have the eyeball, or you have the X with the eyeball for strokes or chokes. Right now all of my eyeballs have the X through them, meaning that I'm not seeing anything on screen. But I'm just going to go ahead and click on strokes for chokes and then hit space bar, and you notice that I'm just viewing that information for that particular layer. So again, it sort of can help you to get rid of distractions of the rest of a busy job if you only want to focus on one particular aspect of it. And if I press F2, when I only have this one layer open and viewed, it only selects objects for that particular layer. If I go to select by spot color, it's only showing me the spot colors for that particular layer that I can view. So again, it's kind of like having multiple files open, but you can have quick access to all the different layers nice and quickly just by turning the eyeballs on or off. So with that being said, just a sort of quick overview of the layer tree, I'm here and I'm looking at strokes for chokes. And if you have a Gerber Edge, you know that in some cases when you're butt register printing, you might have a little bit of a white gap between color A and color B. So I've kind of set this job up so I can try to emulate that. So I'm going to kind of click on this green part here and then move it over. And if I zoom in, you can see that there's a little bit of a white halo there. So again, if you have an Edge, you're probably somewhat familiar with this phenomena. So we've integrated a lot of tools into Omega to try to make it to help you to hide these sorts of effects. And we've had choke, spread, traps, bleeds, and things like that in the tools menu for quite a while. But a couple of releases ago, I think it was Omega 4.0, we added something that I call shorthand. It's called strokes for chokes. And I really like it because it's really a much simpler way to deal with this color-to-color registration issue. So, and what it does, basically, it looks at the fills in your job for whatever you have selected, and it's going to add a stroke to that fill. The stroke is going to be the same color as the fill, and it's going to turn on overlap for that stroke only. So it's going to leave the fill as is, but it's going to turn on overlap for the stroke. So that little extra stroked area is going to serve as the hiding area for the where that white space would be otherwise. So I'm just going to go ahead and go to F8, and I'm going to select that lime green that I have there. And to get to strokes for chokes, or make stroke same color as fill and turn on overlap for strokes, you just fly out your stroke toolbar, and I did that just by clicking on it and holding it. Oh, wait a minute. Just by clicking on it and holding it, or by clicking on the little triangle. And way out here, you notice if I detach this guy, you can see that it says stroke same as fill. And I'm just going to go ahead and click on that, and you're going to notice, let me zoom in a little bit more again. I'm going to undo it. Watch this guy over here. I'm going to click on it, and you're going to notice that it expanded the size of just that green object by a preset value. So, and again, what it did, it added a lime green stroke to that lime green object, and the value of the stroke is set in the stroke dialog box. And it turned on overlap only for the stroke. So it basically expanded my green object by that amount there. So you're saying, well, there's still a white gap that I see there. So if you want to go ahead and adjust that amount, you can select it and then go into the stroke dialog box. And when I go in there, you see it says changes only and solid, and I can adjust my width if I want to. Instead of 0.015, I can make it to be 0.03 inches. And I can go ahead and click on OK. And now when I look at it, oh, I'm closer. I'm not quite close enough yet. So I'll go into the stroke dialog box again. And this is an exaggerated case. Usually 0.015 is, in the cases that I've seen, it's more than enough to deal with it, but it doesn't. You can go ahead and change it very quickly if you want to, just by going ahead and changing that value. See? Let me give it a little more, one more time. Oops. Oh boy, I'm clicking on all the wrong spots. So strokes, same as fill. I go into my stroke dialog box. If you do want to increase that, I could make it to be 0.05. I'm going to really exaggerate it. And now you see that it's expanded that. And so in many cases, it's going to adjust the size of the object as you see it. But it's going to be a negligible amount, so it's not really going to affect what your job looks like. And as you look in here, sometimes when you're zoomed out, you might see a little hint of a white area, but if you zoom in, it tends to correct itself. So, and it's really as simple as that. A lot of times what I'll do, I'm just going to go ahead and undo that. I'll go F2, and then here's another keyboard shortcut that we discussed last time. But if you want to clear all of your strokes, you can use this stroke off button, or you also notice that there's Control+2 is your accelerator key. So you can clear all your strokes by clicking on this button, or by selecting all and then using your keyboard shortcut of Control+2. But sometimes I'll go F2 to select the entire job, and then I'll click on this Strokes for Chokes. And you'll see that, oh, I like to hear that edge run in the background. You see that it does the entire job all at the same time. And sometimes that can also be useful because you can also use Strokes for Chokes for print to cut registration. Because if you have a cut-only object, if you have something with a fill and a cut, it's going to make your cut object to be larger as well. And so that'll serve as a print to cut color registration tool as well. So. We do have a video about Strokes for Chokes as well in our Learning Center that we looked at before. So anyway, again, the point is that you're trying to hide this white space. You go ahead, you select the color that you want to try to change the size of. Click on Strokes for Chokes, and if it's not quite enough, you can go into the stroke dialog box and change that value to be something larger, 0.05 or something like that. And then hopefully it should be enough to cover that space. Is anybody currently using Strokes for Chokes at all, or are you still using choke spreads, or what are you using for color to color?
Choke spread.
Choke spread, okay. And you find choke spread works okay for you too?
I'm going to try this the next job.
Okay, good. Strokes for Chokes. Again, you select the objects, or you can even select all. Go to your stroke flyout. It's this last button all the way out here. And then if you need to adjust the amount, you just go into the stroke dialog box and just change the width. You can also click on Changes Only first. We'll talk about Changes Only here in a moment, and then change your width. Changes Only, change your width. Okay. So Strokes for Chokes. Any questions? If you do think of something later, feel free to chime in. Okay. Next up, we have what I call the magic halftone button. And that's one of the things, since we introduced the Gerber Edge, has always been one of the questions that pops up is, which halftone should I use if I'm doing a gradient fill with a spot color, or if I'm printing out images or what have you. And, we've had seminars on halftones and things like that. So finally, again, in Omega, I think it was in Omega 4.0, we added what we call the magic halftone button. And the magic halftone button is really just a one-click button in GSP-Plot that kind of quickly sort of looks at the objects that are in your job and sort of chooses a halftone that might be is well suited for that particular element of the job. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to take this Dom Perignon graphic, and I'm going to do File, Output Selected, or Shift F12, and I'm going to bring up GSP-Plot, and I'll show you where that magic halftone button resides. This message is about auto archive in GSP-Plot. I'm just going to ignore that for now. So here I am in GSP-Plot, and again, what I want to do is have GSP Plot automatically choose an optimum halftone for this particular job at this particular size. And to get there, you go into this the F11 or the Print Options dialog box, or the 1, 2, 3, and then you go down here and you click on halftone, right down here at the bottom. And once you click on halftone, you notice up here is an auto substitution button. If you want this to be on forever and ever, you just click on auto substitution and then click on preference, and then that's going to automatically try to choose an optimum halftone from this job forward. Again, just click on auto substitution on and click on preference. And so I'll just review that for you here again. So in GSP Plot, you go into the 1, 2, 3, and then you click on halftone, and then turn on auto substitution. And it's going to, based upon whether you have images, you have gradient fills, solid fills, et cetera, and the size of the job, it's going to apply specific halftones based upon a specific set of rules. If you are brave and you want to see what those rules are for auto substitution, you can click on this advanced button, and you can view or you can modify what these actual rules are for 300 DPI, 600 DPI, and if you have an Edge FX for high-res mode, 1200 DPI as well. So you see you have for gradient fills from 0 to 2 inches, it's going to use classical dot 65 LPI. If you wanted to go from 0 to 5 inches, you wanted to use classical dot at 70 LPI, you can adjust it. And then it's going to automatically change this one as well. So if I wanted to go from 0 to 5 inches, you notice that now down here it's going from 5 to, you can make it 11.8 inches or whatever. So you actually have access to all these various rules for all the various sizes for images, for solid fills, for gradients. So you do have access to it, and if you want to save your new set of rules, click on Preference in this dialog box, and it's going to use your new set of rules. But I tend to just kind of leave this on, and it really diminishes questions about, what's the proper halftone. Well, it really depends on what the artwork is and what the size is. So this magic halftone button, as I call it, helps you to deal with those different situations. Okay? All right. Is anybody using that button at all that you know of, or not really sure?
I use it all the time.
Okay, good. So now that's great. And you saw some improved results when you started using that?
Oh, yeah.
Or at least you saw that you didn't have to mess around with it quite as much.
Right.
All right,
I
good.
didn't have to set it myself.
Excellent. And it's all about saving some time, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, good. Okay.
I'm a monument company, so.
You're doing some cutting.
Exactly.
Okay, I understand. So we'll deal with maybe I'll change my order a little bit here. We'll do next up is decal cut and raster to vector. So Phil changed them. I'll change the order for you though, Charles. Okay.
Yeah, I was hoping you'd start at the top, reaction, and apply, because that's one I have trouble with.
Oh, I'm sorry. Say that again.
I was hoping you'd start at the top with the reaction, because I have some trouble with that.
Okay. So I'll do decal cut and raster to vector, and then maybe if nobody has a problem with it, I'll jump up and look at reaction real quick again. And if you have some specific questions, bring them out at that time. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Very good. So that was the magic halftone. Next. And again, that's the beauty of a webinar. I can go ahead and change the order. Decal cut, raster to vector, and OCR. So, and I might even throw in a little Find My Font as well. But in Omega 5.0 and then again in Omega 6.0, we did make some improvements to our raster to vector engine that really can give you some quite improved results based upon as compared to our previous version. So I just kind of have some samples and examples here. And again, if you have questions along the way, feel free. So this is just a logo, and in most cases I've grabbed some logos off of various websites because I know that you don't necessarily get camera-ready artwork. So I try to make it as real life as possible. So I went to Jostens as a yearbook company. My 8th grade twins had to purchase their yearbook. So I said, hey, that's a good example. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to select this image, and then I'm going to go to the Tools menu, and then I'm just going to start with raster to vector, And then I'll also show generate decal cut at the end as well, because they're very similar, but they do have some kind of subtle differences. So raster to vector, what I'm going to do, I'm going to take this sort of pixelated picture, and again, if I press F9 or F8, just to sort of show that that's an image, and you can't cut that on a plotter, so you want to convert that into vectors that you can use. So that's what raster to vector is going to do for me. So I go to Tools, Raster to Vector, and we have sort of a new layout for this dialog box, and we have some really important new buttons here. So one of the most important new buttons that we have is this Input Edge Quality. And what this is referring to is really the quality of the original artwork that you're looking at here on the screen. So as I look at this, I say, well, that certainly isn't camera-ready artwork. That's maybe, you know, low quality to maybe good quality. It depends on your perspective. It depends on the quality of artwork that you get from your customers. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to say, all right, well, why don't we start off with good? We'll say that's pretty good quality. And then the second important button that you want to use is always use preset resample value. And what this does, it's going to take my original image. You see my original information down here is a pixel height. That image is 74 pixels high and 129 pixels wide. So by turning this button on, what it's doing is giving the original image more information, more resolution. So it's resampling from 74 pixels high to 1,000 pixels high. And by doing this resampling, it's actually providing more information to the vectorization tool, the vectorization engine, and it's going to provide me with some drastically improved results. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this off, and I'm going to set this back down to my original pixel height of 74 pixels. And so, and just to sort of illustrate, so you can see it's much more chunkier, much more pixelated just by turning that off. So that's why we probably want to keep this guy on. So I'm going to go ahead and click on OK, and we'll take a look at the results. The survey says that is not the Jostens logo. That's some sort of modern art or something like that. So this is what you get if you don't use these buttons that I was just referring to. So I'm going to go ahead and turn him on again, Tools, Raster to Vector. And I'm going to leave this up here to be good smoother, but this time I'm going to turn on always use preset resample value. And you can see right away that the image quality that's being fed into the vectorization engine is improved drastically. So now I'm just going to go ahead, and by the way, when I turn this on, it stays on, so you don't have to turn that on every time you go in. And now when I look at it, I say, hey, that's the Jostens logo. And if I show the image below it, you can see that it's a nice representation of what we fed into it, even improved based upon that resampling capability. And of course, we'll talk about detail editing here in a moment, but you have all of your detail editing tools if you do want to zoom in and make some enhancements. So if I wanted to sharpen up those corners, I could do that, and we'll talk about detail editing tools here a little bit later in this webinar. Okay? So Charles, is that you, the Monument Company?
That's
good.
What I use.
Okay, and you use that already, or are you on version 5 or version 6, or are you on something previous?
Well, I've got one computer on 5 and one on 6.
Okay, good. Hopefully, does that help to clarify it at all, or are you already using those tools and those buttons?
Yes, it did. I'm using the 5. I have the 6. I just haven't. I've been busy and I haven't upgraded it yet.
Okay. Well, you can do similar things in Omega 5, but you just have to click on a lot more buttons. So again,
well, that's where I get in trouble, because it takes me 8 tries before I finally get what I'm looking for.
Right. So maybe try to fire up that Omega 6, and then try to use those 2 buttons. And I'm going to show some other examples here as well, just to make sure that make sure it sinks in. So I have another logo here, again, Marriott logo, not camera ready. Another one I grabbed off of probably some sort of a booking website or something. I'll go to Tools, and then again I'm going to go to Raster to Vector. And this time, just looking at the edge quality, I'm going to say again, it's either good or low. This time maybe I'll try it at low. And just to sort of reiterate what the differences are, you notice that these 2 settings, and when I click on one of these presets up here, it's automatically changing some of the other settings in this dialog box. So the first thing that it changes is this resample height. So if you have low quality artwork and you resample too much, you're sort of going to integrate, or you're going to inculcate flaws that are in your low quality artwork into your higher quality artwork. So sometimes you don't want to take really bad artwork and resample it too high, because it's just going to give you really high resolution bad quality. So that's what this is doing. It's resampling it less so it doesn't magnify the flaws. So and it also, when I click on these buttons up here, it also changes my pixel fidelity and smoothing settings. So frankly, the ones that I use most often is usually good edge quality or good smoother. But sometimes if I have really poor quality, I'll put it down to low or something like that. So I'm just going to try it on low smoother, and we'll go ahead and take a look. And then I'm going to press F9 to turn off my, my image. And the M itself doesn't look too bad, but if I go down here and I look at this text, I think I can probably do a little bit better by maybe bumping up my setting to be from low to good. And I'll show what the difference is between those. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that, select my logo. That's what it looks like. Tools, raster to vector. And this time, instead of low smoother, I'm going to make it good smoother. And watch what happens down here with my resample pixel width and height. It's going to increase that, but it actually kept my pixel fidelity and smoothing settings at about the same. So I'll go ahead and I'll click on OK. And this time, when I turn that off, you notice I'm just going to go ahead. So this is what it is with my good setting. The Marriott text actually looks a little bit better, I think. I'm going to go ahead and undo it. So you see it's a little looser, a little smoother, as opposed to going ahead and showing it with that higher setting. So, you know, you can sort of do some bracketing and try some what-if scenarios just by trying it once and then undoing it if you don't like it and trying it again. So, and you can overlay different versions on top of each other, or you can delete them and just try again. All right, the next one I'm going to show is something probably it doesn't happen all that often, but some really pretty good quality original artwork. So this is an Adidas logo, nice crisp, solid black and white. I go to Tools, raster to vector, and this time, because I think this is pretty good quality or excellent quality, I'm going to go ahead and do excellent smoother. And this time, instead of resampling from to 1,000 pixels, it's actually resampling me up to 2,000 pixels automatically. And I have this guy always turned on. Always use preset resample value. I go ahead, click on OK, and then I'm going to press F9, and there you see you have nice sharp corners, nice crisp quality, et cetera, et cetera. So if I want to look at what my points are, I just press the letter D for detail edit, and that's what we have. So, all right, and then my final example here in raster to vector is I'm going to combine kind of two things here. I'm going to cheat, but by cheating, it's actually not cheating, but by cheating, I'm going to save myself a lot of time in the whole raster to vector and detail edit process. So I'm going to do that by just looking at my artwork again, and again, this is just an electronics company somewhere, and I select it, I go to Tools, and then raster to vector, and like I said, usually I just keep it on maybe good or good smoother. I'm going to put it on good smoother, resamples me to 1,000, sets my pixel fidelity and smoothing. Then I'm going to go ahead and click on OK. And again, I'm going to press F9. Pressing F9, by the way, is the same as going to the View menu, and you can show image down here. So show image, I'm just basically toggling this guy on and off. So for this particular example, after my raster to vector, I think the logo is in pretty good shape, but again, using some of my detail edit tools, if I want to, I can sharpen these guys up or make them, I can align them. So just using existing detail edit capabilities, I can zoom in here, and again, we'll cover detail edit here in a moment, but this is sharpen corner. I just sharpen those corners up. Some good stuff there. But as I look down here at my Indium, at the text down here, the text is not bad, especially when you consider the quality of the original artwork. It actually is very good fidelity to the original low-quality artwork. So what I can do is spend a lot of time trying to clean up this text, but I'm going to jump into a sort of leapfrog into another topic, which is called Find My Font. This is a feature that we added in Omega 6.0, so I'm going to go ahead and start Find My Font. And again, this is included if you upgrade to Omega 6.0. And Find My Font is basically exactly what it sounds like. It helps you to identify unknown fonts that are on your computer screen. So it can be in Composer, it can be in a PDF file, it can be in a Word for Windows doc file, in a Photoshop file, it can be in whatever software program. If you're displaying some text on the screen, you can can use Find My Font to help identify what that font is. So I don't particularly know what this font is, but if I show it filled, what I'm going to do is start Find My Font, and you just want to put Find My Font on top of the program that is showing the font that you need to identify. So I have Composer in back, and now I just have Find My Font in front of Composer. And what I'm going to do is go ahead and click on this little camera icon, and it's going to take a screenshot of the screen in back of it. And I'm going to go ahead, and you have a little letter selection tool. You go ahead and click on the letters that you want to try to identify. And if you want to, you have some sliders up here. So you notice that the I is a little ragged. I'm going to just move my slider a little bit to the right-hand side, and it's going to grab a little bit more of that letter I. So you have sort of a tolerance slider that you can use. And then you just click on a couple of the letters that you want to identify. And then, so I'm just going to do I-N-D-U-M. I-N-D-U-M. No need to do the I twice. And then over here on the right-hand side, I'm going to go ahead and click on Match Fonts. And the thing that's really nice about Find My Font is that not only does it match to fonts out on the Internet, and there's a database of like 150,000 different fonts that it tries to match to, but even more useful is that it's going to try to match to fonts that are also installed on your system. So there's just a little quick procedure where you point Find My Font to the fonts that you have installed on your system, whether it's in Windows Fonts folder, or if you have a repository of fonts that you actually don't install, but you just sort of use and install as you need them. You can even point it to that folder as well, and it can compare to fonts that are on your system or fonts in this massive database out on the Internet. And as another piece, as part of being part of the Gerber Omega suite, is that we've also added Gerber fonts into the mix as well. So we've taken all of the traditional Gerber fonts that you use in text entry, and we've turned them into fonts that can be identified by Find My Font out in the Internet database. So if you click on this button here, you can choose all fonts freemium, which means that chances are it might be free if you want to. Commercial, which it means chances are you're going to have to pay for it. Either Google Web Fonts, which is a collection of fonts that Google has put out there on the Internet that are also free to use, and then Gerber fonts. So if you have you have quite a selection of fonts from Gerber Omega just by having Omega whatever 3, 4, 5, 6. So you can try to identify to those. So I just did it to all fonts, and the good news is that the #1 match that it found up here is Rockwell Bold, and it says that it's a system font. A system font means that it's actually already installed and ready for use on your computer. And if you only want to do it for a local search, you can turn off the online search, and you can find fonts that are installed on your computer only if you don't want to go out and purchase a font, or you can't connect to the Internet or whatever. So. But anyway, Rockwell Bold is a system font. So now what I'm going to do is come back here, and a system font means that it's a true type font, so I can use my Gerber small text. So I fly this guy out, and I'm going to use my Gerber small text, and I'll click here. I'm going to type in INDIUM, and I'm going to go find the font Rockwell Bold. So I'm going to click on my letter A here. And I'm just going to click on a font and type in ROCK, and it should be in there. And I don't want regular, I want bold. And I'm going to take a stab. Maybe it's around 20 points for the size. And there's indium. And I'm going to go ahead and make that just solid black. Or maybe I'll make it green. There we go. So there's indium, and I'm just going to scale this up. And instead of having to spend, to try to detail edit that text before, I just went out, I spent 25 or 30 seconds to try to identify that font, and I just entered it in as small text. And if I want to, I can go ahead and convert that small text into vectors by removing the text small edit. And now I should have indium there as a nice crisp reproduction of what I had in that low-quality artwork. So don't spend 30 minutes or 40 minutes or an hour or 2 hours cleaning up the text when you can identify it in a matter of seconds. And the nice thing, again, about Find My Font is that it gives you a whole plethora of fonts that you can choose, and the number you have on the left-hand side is the level of match. So the higher this percentage is on the left-hand side, the better the match. So in a lot of cases, if you have a very close match, you might have something that's 94, 95%. In this case, it's 81.38%, but it turns out that that's actually a good match. It probably has to do with a low-quality original artwork as opposed to, oh, plus I typed it in wrong, as opposed to, so now that I've actually typed in the things, I bet I'm going to get a higher number now. I just typed in INDUM when I said INDUUM. Oh, I see. Never mind. Gotcha. So one of the things that you can do is that you notice the U and the M are connected over here. So we even have the ability to disconnect those. So I'm going to go down here, and I'm going to disconnect my letters. So I'm just going to use my disconnect tool and click through those, and now I can go back to my letter selection tool and add the M, delete the UM. So INDUM. Anyway, I'm sort of in the weeds. I apologize. But now you see that Rockwell Bold, because I had the proper letters typed in, is now 94% instead of 81%. So just showing that it does a nice job, quick job. Don't spend hours and hours trying to rebuild text when you can try to find it in a matter of seconds. So, okay. Any questions on that guy there? Oh, one more thing that I do want to show is right down here I have this Google Doodle. I'm going to zoom in on this. I'm going to show the difference between Generate Decal Cut and Raster to Vector. So the purpose of Raster to Vector is really to take sort of solid artwork and convert it into vectors for cutting on a plotter or for adding fills for your Gerber Edge or what have you. So I used Raster to Vector for Jostens and for the Marriott and for Indium over here. But sometimes when you might have a graphic where you want to sort of create a halo around the outside, or you might have artwork that has some gradients and colors and things like that. Raster to Vector, as I'll show in a moment here, is going to not provide enough information because it's really oriented toward darker types of graphics. So if I go into Tools and then Raster to Vector like I did before, you notice that I really only have, and I have this preview black-white image down here, I only have some of the outlines and some of the colors have been discarded. But what if I want to actually use this as sort of a halo cut around the outside edge? Well, if too many colors are being reduced or eliminated, you can go ahead and instead of clicking on Omega Trace up here, you can click on Decal Cut. And now you notice that I have more of the graphic included. And if I want to reduce that, if I can actually do that by using this slider. For Decal Cut, you can use it in conjunction with this slider to reduce or eliminate certain colors and to sort of lighten it up. So with Omega Trace or with Raster to Vector, the slider doesn't do anything. But with Decal Cut, the slider is a nice way to sort of fine-tune the graphic. So I'm going to go ahead and leave it on at the far right and click on OK. And then I'll press F9 again so I can see. And now you see that I kind of have, it's more inclusive. It shows more of a decal or a halo cut. And if I want to get rid of some of this, I can go ahead and just hold down my control click and get rid of some of these inside shapes. Or I can also, if I want to, I can also select this object and then go into Tools and then Outline. And I can sort of outline this and get more of a halo cut if I want to. So I'll put this up to 0.3 inches. And in Omega 6, we added the Apply button so I can see the results right here. Now I know I want to hide my originals and apply. So in Omega 6, you have the ability to apply effects from some of your tools dialog boxes. So you can see it on screen, and then you can adjust your settings without jumping in and out of the dialog box so many times. So let's say, OK, 0.3 is good, and then I click on OK. And then there's my decal or my halo cut. And again, if I want to clear that green fill from my decal cut, I can just go ahead and select it. And I can fly out this guy and turn my fill off. Or I can undo that and just do Control and the number 1 on the keyboard. And that's a keyboard shortcut to clear all fills. All right. So that's Decal Cut versus Raster to Vector. And just in general, the Raster to Vector and Decal Cut capabilities. Any questions about that? Anybody else in the monument industry? Did that help at all to clarify?
How you doing? Talking.
Okay, hopefully that provided a little bit of clarification. And again, just to sort of review real quick, you select your image, go into Tools, Raster to Vector. Make sure that you choose your input edge quality based upon the quality of the original artwork. Always use preset resample value. Keep him on, and then go. And then hopefully you'll get some nice, clean, crisp results nice and quickly. And if you have some text that you have to try to rebuild, well, don't try to rebuild it. If you have Omega 6, you can use Find My Font to try to identify that font and just enter it in as text and have perfect crisp quality just in a matter of seconds. Good. All right. Decal cut raster vector. Fill changes only. The next thing I'm going to talk about is really, it's again another button, just a single button in the fill dialog box. And what this allows you to do is to just change only a certain aspect of your fill. So, for example, if you have some objects on the screen and they have various colors and some have solid fills and some have linear fills and things like that, what you can do with this Changes Only button is only change one aspect of the fill. So here you see that I have a solid fill and I have a gradient fill and I have blue and I have green. So what if I want to change only the fill type from solid and linear fill to be just a solid? I can do that by going into my fill dialog box and clicking on Changes Only. Changes Only means it's only going to change those settings that I click on in this dialog box. So I'm only going to change from a fill type of a gradient and a solid. I'm going to click on solid. It's going to make everything solid. It's going to keep my colors the same. It's going to keep my halftone the same. It's going to keep overlaps over prints the same. It's going to keep combines the same. So it left my colors alone, but it only changed it from a linear fill to be a solid fill. So I'll go ahead and undo that and just sort of go in here again. Go into the dialog box, make sure Changes Only is on. And by the way, you can set this as a default if you want to. I'll show you that in 1 second. This time I only want to change it from, I want to keep my colors the same, but I want to make them to be, let's see, I'm going to make them both to be gradient fills. So hopefully it'll do it. Let me see if it's going to cooperate. I think it should. But so that time, I clicked on solid, then I clicked on gradient. I only changed them from whatever state they were in to be gradient. So you notice that my colors are the same, but it turned them both into gradient fills. It changes only those settings that you click on in the fill dialog box. All right, does that make sense? And if I didn't have this turned on, let me show you what would happen. So I'm going to go ahead and go into my fill dialog box, and I'm going to assign attributes all. So right now you notice that I have this to be a green gradient fill, and with all turned on or Changes Only turned off, it's going to assign everything in this dialog box to everything that's selected. So it's not changing only those things I checked on, it's changing everything in that dialog box. So that's what the subtle difference is, and that's what the power is of the Changes Only button. So if you want Changes Only to be on all the time, you just click on it and then go to the menu, this menu button down at the bottom, and then there is Save Preferences. Go ahead and click on Save Preferences, and it's going to preference Changes Only to be on every time you go into that dialog box. And again, if you just want to assign everything in this dialog box, you just have to click from Changes Only up to all, and it'll behave in its traditional manner. So that's Changes Only. Kind of can be a subtle thing, but can be a huge time saver if you have a job where you have different fill types and you want to change everything just to be a single color. Or you just want to change it from, keep the fill colors, but make everything solid instead of having gradients or what have you, okay? And some of the other things you can do, I can make everything to be solid, and I can change my tint to be 50%. So it's only going to change everything to be solid, and it's going to keep my colors the same, but it's going to make them solid and make them a 50% tint because I have Changes Only turned on. All right? So it really is it's a powerful little button in there, but it's unfortunately kind of hidden away. But I think it's a hugely useful thing that I just leave it preferenced on for my own usage all the time. Okay, let's see. I'm going to jump around a little bit again, if that's okay. I already covered Find My Font. And if anybody has questions, I'll be happy to go in, but I did that during the raster vector section. I'm going to do space by value, and then I'll do detail edit. And if anyone has any other questions, feel free. Feel free to chime in. Any questions so far, or so far so good?
So far, so good.
Okay, good.
That's good.
All right. So next I'm going to do space by a value. And so I just have a whole bunch of shapes on my screen here, and each one of these, this is just basically from the Wingdings font or whatever, maybe Webdings or something like that. And these are all grouped. They're all grouped together because I entered them in as individual lines, and then I just put them in here randomly. So you notice that this is kind of a messy thing, but I'm going to sort of clean this up and apply order to these guys very quickly and easily by using my alignment tool and my spacing tool. So the first thing that I want to do, let's say I want to have these guys all be spaced, and I want them to be centered. So if you go into, and you can right-click and get to this. You can go here, and you can go to, let's see, see, I'm used to using my accelerator key, sorry. So I'll go to Arrange, and I'll do Justify. So I want these all to be justified. Basically, I want them to be aligned on a straight line, and I want them to be aligned so they're all centered on that straight line. So I go ahead and I click on Vertical Only, and now they're all sort of aligned. And what if I want these all to be, maybe 1 inch apart from each other? So I can go ahead and turn on my grid, and I can turn on axis or use my Alt key to constrain the movement, and I can move them, and it's kind of laborious, taking a long time. Or I can use my capability that's called, let me redo that. It's called spacing. We have a spacing tool also in the Arrange menu, Arrange, and then we have spacing down here toward the bottom. And what spacing does is that you can have everything either automatically space based upon the selection of all your objects. So I can have it space so it has an equal distance between each object. And it's going to sort of, based upon the cramped distance that I have there, it's going to space them all as closely as it can. But because it's all cramped, there's definite overlap there. So I'm just going to go ahead and undo that. I'll go into Arrange and then Spacing again. And again, there's a button down here, Automatic. I'm going to turn Automatic off. And I'm going to tell it I want it to space horizontally. And I'm going to tell it next that I want it to have a 0.5 inch gap, a 0.5 inch space based upon this guy between each one of my objects. And I go ahead and click on OK. And now you see that I have a 0.5 inch space between the furthest extents of each one of these objects. So I'll go to my Measure tool, Control M, and I'll click here and then click here, and you see I'm 0.528, but probably just sort of missed a little. But you see that each one of these guys, if I click from here, backspace, click from here to here, these are all a ½ inch apart from each other. So that's, again, a nice time saver where you can sort of apply order to a job that's very messy by using your Justify and then spacing to a value. So let me just undo that again, and I'll go into Arrange and Justify. And then if I want to, I could actually, in this Justify dialog box, you can click on more than one thing at the same time. So I'm gonna stack them all together in this case. So that's the ultimate in order. I made a big mess out of my big mess. But this time I'm going to go to Arrange, and I'm going to tell it, well, I want everything to be spaced. I want it to be spaced horizontally, and I want to add 1 inch between 1 inch space between each of my objects. And there you see that you have it done nice and quickly and easily, and without wasting 15 minutes, frankly, trying to space these objects apart.
How about the hotkey, Control F9?
There we go. I like it. I'm a definite hotkey fan. So,
or Shift F9 for.
Yep. If you do Control F9, that's going to bring up spacing exactly. If you do Shift F9, that's going to bring up your Justify dialog box. And if you want to use your hotkeys in this dialog box, you also have 1 through 8 as accelerator keys. So you have 1, and you notice that horizontal lit up when I did 1, or 2 is the center horizontal, 3 is the right horizontal, 4, 5, 6, and what 7 is stack. So it's doing center horizontal and center vertical at the same time. And then 8 is center of gravity, and center of gravity is kind of a visual spacing or a visual justification, where sometimes when you do the mathematical justification, it doesn't quite look right. So center of gravity takes into account the sort of the weight and the shape of the objects and makes them look visually correct as opposed to mathematically correct. So, but anyway, again, I'll do 7 and then Enter, and then I'll do Control F9, and then I'll do horizontal, or I can press the same here. I can do 1 for horizontal with that gap, and then I turn my automatic off and say I want 5 inches space between each one of those, and it spaces those right out. So there you go. And then this kind of reminds me also of nesting. I covered nesting in Tips and Tricks Part 1, but just to sort of recap real quick for nesting. Nesting is a nice way if you have a gobbledygook and you want to make order out of it. You can select all your objects, go into the Tools menu, and then go into Nesting. And you can even make copies of your objects if you want to. So say I want 5 copies of each of these objects, and these are sort of my default settings. I'm not going to get into this too much, but I'm going to go ahead and click on OK, and it's going to nest these objects on a new layer. Nesting, and it's, I see I did it by the wrong button. Let me undo that. I hate when I do that. Where was I? I was back here, space by a value. Okay. This time I'm going to select them all, go into Tools, and then Nesting, and I want to tell it to nest by groups, not by outermost contours. Because I had outermost contours turned on, it was actually just taking this outside object and keeping everything together. So I'm going to tell it to nest by groups. I want 5 copies. Boom. And then I have a new layer up here, which is called nesting. So it puts your nested results on a new layer. Oh, you are bummed.
Your sheet length is set to 0.
My what was set? My what was set to 0?
Your sheet length.
Yeah, that one's okay actually. See, now this is. I'm going to go F2, Tools, Nesting. I want it to nest by groups. But if your length, your sheet length is set to 0, what that means is that it's going to try to cram it into this height, this 12-inch height, as efficiently as possible and let the length float. So a length of 0, as it says in this little tool tip that popped up, to tightly nest objects to a particular length, set the length to that value and set the height to 0. But if you wanted to cram it into a 12-inch height but let the length float and you don't want to try to set a sheet size, then you just set the length to be 0. That's kind of the default that I use. But anyway, I have it set by groups. This should be working, but if it doesn't, we're going to just chalk it up to live television here. My bad. Oh well. I'll do a revised version and send it in the video follow-up. But this does work, I promise. I use it all the time. All right, dummy. Anyway, so that was space by a value. Again, that's just a button hidden in the spacing dialog box, but it can save you really a lot of time if you're trying to make sense out of something that's a big mess. So, all right. Next up, I'm going to go and jump into Detail Edit. Detail Edit or Node Editing or whatever it might be called, whatever your preference is. We have a lot of great features, and again, there might be some things that are hidden. But I'm just going to kind of ramble through some of the different things that we have for Detail Edit. So everybody uses Detail Edit, right? Node editing, the hook and the pointy pointer and things like that to get rid of your points and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Any particular questions about detail editing before I jump in? Or it's all good? Okay. And as I go here, feel free to chime in again. So detail editing again is this toolbar here where you have your detail selection tool, you have add point, you have delete point, you have move, your hook tool, you have slice and dice, and I'll sort of go through what these are, but I'll show some of the things that you can do here real quick. So the first thing that you can do with this, of course, you know that you have your hook tool, and you can use your hook tool to adjust the curvature by using your curve guides here, or you can also move a particular point just by clicking and dragging on a particular point. But some people don't know that if you want to, you can actually select objects with your detail selection pointer, and you can actually move multiple objects or multiple segments in different shapes at the same time just by detail selecting them. So you see that I'm going to get the exact same movement in these two objects just by doing this simple detail selection. Another thing about the hook that you might not know, sometimes these curve guides are really useful, but other times they get in the way. You can actually turn the curve guides off if you want to by clicking on Show Curve Control Points. So you can turn them on and turn them off and sort of just edit the raw vectors if you want to by turning off those curve guides. You can't edit the curve if the curve guides are off, but you can certainly edit the vectors themselves. Okay. So just a little bit about the hook there. The other thing, too, that I always like to talk about with a hook, here you notice that we have a circle, and this curve guide is kind of in seesaw mode, where as I move one end of the seesaw, the other end of the seesaw moves in the opposite direction. You can also change that setting up here in this property toolbar that pops up when you click on the hook tool. And by the way, a different property toolbar pops up as you click on the various detail edit tools. So when I'm in the hook tool, you have the ability to do smooth, sharp, and symmetric. So right now I'm in the smooth mode, which gives me that seesaw effect. If you want to, for some reason, you want to have a sharp transition between one curve and the other, you just click on sharp, and you notice that I'm no longer getting that seesaw effect. So that allows me to create a sharp transition from the previous segment to this segment here, just by clicking on this sharp icon in the properties toolbar. And then the final one is symmetric. Symmetric is kind of subtle, so I still get the seesaw effect with symmetric, but you notice that it not only does it change the direction in the opposite direction, but it also changes the amplitude. It changes the length. So this helps you to get a sort of a symmetric curve by giving you the seesaw effect, as well as by changing the distance of your curve guide in the opposite direction. So sharp, smooth, and symmetric. I tend to keep it on smooth for the most part. That tends to work for me, but I usually sort of ping pong between smooth and sharp. Those are the two that I tend to use the most. Sharp kind of gives you a little more flexibility if you need it. So, all right. Another feature that I like to show is, of course, we have some of our automated features in here as well. Let me just move these guys off a little bit. So we have make corner sharp and make corner round, and I use those guys constantly. So as I zoom into this raster to vector result here, I'm just going to press F2 to select all. So you notice that I have sort of this truncated corner here, or this truncated edge. And if you just use the hook, you can go ahead and you can use the hook and you can sort of try to sharpen this guy up and you can delete the point. But when I use this hook, you notice that I'm also kind of changing this segment that's out of my view. So it kind of makes me nervous that I don't know what I'm doing to other parts of that graphic. Or, of course, you have the Sharpen Corner tool here. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on Sharpen Corner, and then it's really just a simple click and drag, and the size of the box that you select around the corner dictates the amount of the curve that it's going to take into account when it sharpens that corner. So if you just want to just affect just the very tip of it, just make a small selection box. If you want to try to get more of it and have it more of a sweeping curve, you just get more of that corner. And what it does, it creates a sharp corner that is tangential to where this box intersects with that shape. So you see that the bigger it is, it's basically making a corner that's straight from where this box intersected. So that's Sharpen Corners. Everybody using that guy already? Hopefully you are, and if you're not, well, that's good because you learned something at the webinar. And so there's Sharpen Corner down there. So it's very simple to use, very straightforward, and just kind of sharpens up your corners very quickly and easily. Again, the size of your marquee selection dictates the amount of the corner that it's, or the amount of the curve that it's going to use to sharpen that corner. And as I go over here to this Open Solutions, you notice that we have some other areas in here that I can sharpen up real nice and quick just by clicking and dragging and just by sharpening that up. All right, this guy here too. And then, of course, what good would Sharpen Corner be if it didn't have a sister feature, which is called Round Corner? And Round Corner works in a very similar manner. You click on Round Corner, and instead of making things sharp, it makes them round. And it also allows you to set the radius for that particular corner that you made. So you can either enter in a manual radius, or you can also click and drag on the double-headed arrow to adjust what that radius is. And if I like that radius, I can go ahead and I can just simply click on other corners, and it's going to apply that same radius to the other corners. And sometimes you get that funny effect, but that's okay. I can just go ahead and click and drag and change that guy as well. So that's your ability to round corners as well. So you have Sharpen Corners and Round Corners. There you go. Another great time saver. So I'm looking at my clock. I'm showing 11:01, and I'm just going to show one more thing here in Detail Edit, and then I'll let you guys get on your way for the rest of the day. But I certainly appreciate you joining, and if anybody has to go, because it's supposed to go from 10 to 11, I understand completely, but I'll just finish up with Smooth in the Detail Edit section here. And as I said, we have a recording, and I'll forward that as well as the PowerPoint and this PLT file out to everybody who attended. So thank you in advance. If you got to go, I understand. And I'll just finish up with Smooth Corner. An hour goes fast, doesn't it? Holy Toledo. Is anyone from Toledo? All right, so the next thing I'm going to cover here in Detail Edit is Smooth Path. And what this does, this is something just a kind of a messy logo we actually we found out somewhere. And I'm just going to go ahead and move this guy off. And what I can do with Smooth Corner, with Smooth, is you notice that this is obviously a very rough, very jagged kind of a thing. So I'm just going to go ahead and zoom in on this, and I'm going to click. And based upon my smoothing settings, you saw that it smoothed it out once. If I want more smoothing, I can either click on it again, and you notice that it's giving me substantially smoother results each time. Or the other thing that I can do is change the value of my smoothing. So a lower number is less smoothing. If I set this up to be 20, it's giving me a smoother value just by changing the threshold in my smoothing properties box here. So you also notice with smoothing is that it also smoothed out my corners a little bit. The nice thing is that you can also be very selective with what you're smoothing as well. I can do that by just clicking and dragging and avoiding certain areas. So I'm just going to avoid these straight lines. Hopefully I got it there. Let's see. So you notice that I just clicked and dragged, and now I maintained my nice sharp corners, and over here I can smooth it out a little bit more again. Or the other thing is that you can use smoothing in conjunction with your detail selection tool. So I'm just going to double click on this. It detail selected the entire letter C, and I'm just going to turn off those straight lines and then go over here to my smoothing tool, and it's only going to smooth those things that are detail selected. And again, it left my straight lines alone because I canceled selection on those. So. And here for the circle, there are no straight lines, so you can sort of have at it and smooth everything out nice and quickly. And again, if you want to smooth it even more, just click on it a second time. In the case over here with the letter X, if I want to, again, be selective with this, I can sort of click and drag down here and smooth that out. Or, again, I can do it in conjunction with my detail pointer. So click on my detail pointer, double-click on this particular guy, turn him off. I'm just sort of blindly clicking in the corner here just to maintain a nice sharp corner. And I'm turning off those corners. And then I'll go back to my Smooth tool and go ahead and smooth that out. And it smoothed everything except for those things that I turned off. And again, if I want to smooth this a little more, I can detail select again, and I can just choose a particular area, or I can just click and drag and just smooth it that way. So that's the smoothing tool. Hopefully, again, oh, and look, I have some nasty corners I want to try to sharpen up. So I can go over here, and I can sharpen this corner up, and I'm just going to include that entire corner. And you see that I just sharpen that up without having to use my hook tool and my delete tool and things like that. It just sharpens it right up nice and quickly. So that's a little bit touching quickly on Detail Edit. Again, an hour webinar is kind of short, but I'd like to thank you all for joining, and I hope you have a good day. And I'll send you a sort of a summary and a recording. And if anybody has any questions, you'll have my email. Feel free to send me an email back, and I'll be happy to help you in any way I can. All right.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you, everybody. Have a great day, and
Goodbye.
watch out for that hurricane down there.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, bye-bye.
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 Thank you again.